Welcome. This is the Drupal usability meeting for November 15th, 2024. I'm Benji Fisher moderating. Ralph Kohler is sharing their screen, and Simo Helston is also here. Go ahead, Ralph.
Thanks, Benji. We're looking at issue number 3169876, better handling of time zones for relative default date and times. I think the best, we simply step through the setup process, and then it's directly clear what this issue is all about. First, the setup process. Shall I go through the setup on my side or on yours?
Do it on yours. I've already set up mine. I also chose New York.
Okay. Yeah, I went first, multilingual has to be activated, and then I've set up, oh, not sure if it's really necessary, but yeah, I've set up the default time zone for the site to New York. Then I have my user 1, our caller, that is set to the time zone Berlin. And then I have the admin, the user 2 admin that is set also to New York. Then in the next step, I went to a content type. I created a content type called date, simply with a single field, also called date. And if I go in there, edit, and I tick the set default value and choose the option relative date, I've gone with the relative default value +2. So in the Saturday, the Saturday after
Two
the
Saturdays from
next,
now.
yeah, 2 Saturdays from now. That way is the correct way to phrase it. Apologies. Yeah, so 2 Saturdays from now at 13 o'clock. And now I went ahead and created nodes. I went already through all the different variations. So basically, if you go now to add content, I am currently logged in as our caller, and do I have my, and the patch is not applied right now. That is the current behavior in Drupal core. Patch not applied, and our caller Berlin as a reminder, and I save. And as you can see, we have 2 o'clock compared to 1 o'clock on the default, on the relative default value. Here it shows 2 o'clock now, save. And if I go in here, do UX meeting, ddev, login, admin, admin. If I go into content, add content, date, no patch, admin, New York. As you can see, we have now 8 a.m. on here as the placeholder value you have. Save. And now I could simply check out the branch, run update db, otherwise I get into an error. I reload. Date. Now I have 1 p.m. Patch. Admin. New York. Save. Go on here. Also 1 p.m. Patch. Caller. Berlin. Save. And now the interesting part is basically if we go to the front end, patch not applied for our color. Or basically, I have written up a summary on here. And as you can see here on the node edit form, patch not applied. The node edit form shows for our color in Berlin, 2 p.m. On the node edit form for admin, 8 a.m. And the node itself shows again 2 p.m., which is correct, is identical to the node edit form for the node page created. Admin 8 a.m. And as you can see here, node edit form for admin 8 a.m. while then 6 hours in the future, 14, not the future, but 6 hours plus, and 8 a.m. is identical. And now with the merge request applied, the behavior changes. As you can see here, now on the node edit form, it's consistently at 1 p.m. As set on the field settings, while on the node itself, as you can see here, yeah, as the node creator with Berlin, that is in line 1 o'clock, 1 o'clock, and the earlier is 7 a.m. for the New York one, while if you create it in New York, then it's the other way around. So the point of reference here is basically the user with the merge request from my perspective. Before that, it was basically the site, the point of reference, but it's confusing. Any questions?
So let's see. Without the merge request applied,
Yes.
um, the default, it, if you don't pay attention to the edit form, but just look at the front end of the site, it's 14 o'clock and 8 o'clock, depending on whether you're in Berlin or New York. And both of those are 13 o'clock UTC, right?
That's also the question. Where is the setting? Yeah, what's the time format for the relative default value here? Is it UTC or what is the point of reference? That is also not, there are no specific informations about the context that relative default value field is in. If it refers to the site, if it refers to the user, and what is the time zone here?
Um, okay, but just looking at your chart, 8 o'clock New York time is 13 o'clock UTC. So it looks as though the date was created with a value of 13 o'clock UTC. And we
That
ch
is,
and we change that with the patch so that um, whatever time the node editor uses is interpreted as being in their time zone rather than UTC. So I'd like to try a couple of more experiments. Um, so say without the patch, um, if I don't take the default time zone, but I change it, I override it, what do I get? So is this
Um,
really a question about the default, or is this a question about how that field is interpreted in general?
one sec, I'll switch back to the main branch. Yeah. So what changes shall I make on the field setting?
No, just create a new node.
Just
And you're logged in as rcoller.
yeah. So Berlin. Berlin is the point of reference for me here.
So for the title, say rcoller Berlin, override the default. And I don't know, make it 2 o'clock a.m. or whatever.
Okay.
So save that.
Yeah. 2 a.m.
Well, that's interesting. So this really is a question of how the default is treated. Am I right? How the default. Oh no.
Once, but you still have that setting here. That is 13.
But that's just a default value. And you've overridden that. So wait,
True.
I guess that is consistent. That's not surprising. So if you see 2 p.m. on the node edit form, then you also see 2 p.m. on the front end.
That's true. But no, but the one thing that
And,
confused me at least is the point, as you can see here, the patch not a, we have here 1 p.m. as the setting on the field on the as the default on the field setting. With no patch applied, it's 1 hour plus. With the patch applied, it's the same. That is also one detail why it confused me. As you can see here, 2:13, 1 p.m., 2 p.m., and again underneath here with the merge pressed 1 p.m.
okay, so I think I see. So when you enter a default value of 13 o'clock in the default date, and then you create a node, the default supplied isn't 13 o'clock. It's 13 o'clock UTC, and then it's displayed in your time zone.
Yeah,
Um,
it's here 2 p.m. compared to 13, which is 1 p.m.
I think as a general rule, if it's a site-wide date display, no matter if it's on the node or on a form. So if it's actually the site-wides are always on form. So the site-wide settings should be on the site default date, default time zone, and no matter if it's display or edit form, the time and date should be in the user's time zone. So that should be kind of that basic rule. So if it's a or should those defaults also depend? So should setting the default also, if it doesn't include time zone setting, should the default also include we use the user's time zone? So when you set the default, does the default form where you set the default, did it look different with different users?
No, it has not.
So
As you can see here,
Yeah,
it does. It does. Without the patch applied, it does. As you can see here, too many windows. Apologies. If you go in here, that is the admin. It's 8 a.m. and in here it's 2 p.m. without a patch applied.
Yeah, but with the field settings,
And
is it the same?
On the
Because
field
I think
settings, 1 second. No, we have to go in here directly. Manage, edit. No, there it. Just wanted to make sure. No, on the field settings, it's always the 1 p.m.
Yeah, so that's the string kind of. So I think here the problem is that when I think the correct behavior would be that the relative value would take in regard the user who is looking at it. So the default value should be fixed to something, and then it should be displayed according to the user settings, and that's where the problem is.
Yep.
So and that's PHP or something like that that's causing the problem. So I think we should, for relative default value, I think we should change the widget so that it could take into regard the user setting, or it should clearly indicate that it adds to the UTC, and then it would be straightforward as well. But I think the biggest problem is that without any details, the relative default value on this form, it's incorrect because it doesn't adjust to the user setting. So it's kind of skipping the. So because I think everything should display according to the user settings.
I think the point you've made before feels correct to me, that within the admin UI, the system settings or the site settings should be respected in the point of reference. And in here for that, because that is a slippery slope if you start, for example, if you have 3 or 4 site builders working on a site, and then you would always have to add who actually created that field and set the relative default value. And therefore for the peace of mind, it probably would be the better choice, as you've said, the point sticking to the site default. And on the other hand, a point I've already mentioned on the issue itself is to provide the point of reference and explicitly name it. So the time zone for one, that it's UTC, for example, and provide an actual example of what a certain example value, like the +2 Saturday 13 at 1 p.m. would result into.
Can I ask you to do another experiment?
Sure.
So on this page,
Yeah.
after the time, enter a time zone like America/New York.
Okay. Save.
Yeah.
Enter is invalid.
Try capitalizing.
That way?
Yeah.
No.
Still doesn't.
Should we try GMT plus 5? That works.
Okay.
Ooh.
So now as our caller, so your personal time zone is
Oh.
Berlin. Are you going to get 19 o'clock?
Oh. Oh.
Broken.
Broken.
Interesting.
Yeah, but we are on the 11.x without the patch applied. Should we try to reapply it again?
Sure. Although,
Or should I wait?
oh, go ahead.
Okay. Okay. No, still broken.
Okay. So when you enter default time, 13 o'clock is what we've been using. That could mean various things. It could mean 13 o'clock UTC. It could mean 13 o'clock in the site's default time zone, or it could mean 13 o'clock in the user's time zone. Um, Now, it's debatable whether it should be the system time zone, the site time zone, or the user time zone, but it certainly shouldn't always be UTC, and that's what it seems to be. Right? You set the site time zone to New York, and
Yeah.
one of the users was also New York, and the other user was Berlin. And yet they saw their default time was always 13 o'clock UTC. Now, the the description gives a link to the string to time PHP function or strto time. And I guess it's just passing whatever you type to that function. And I also wonder, when you set up this field, um, did you choose to store it in the database as a timestamp or as a date time string?
It shows the date type, date and time.
Okay. Um,
And there are no other settings in here.
Interesting. string. So if you click on that link, yeah, that one. I mean, see that warning there? The Unix timestamp that this function returns does not contain information about time zones.
Oh,
So, so if we are storing the date as a datetime string in the database, then we should not be passing anything to this function. We should be saving something close to what the user has entered.
so that has to be removed again.
Yeah, that seems to.
But in the first place, GMT, anything with GMT plus whatever, or let's test UTC plus 3, that is also savable. So all those should be invalid, technically, based on the warning over there with a string to time.
Oh, and I see Aaron has joined us. Aaron McHale. Hi, Aaron.
Hi.
So we're talking about time zones, everybody's favorite topic.
Why do you hate yourselves?
Exactly my point. And the funny thing is,
I just came for a walk. I'd rather go out on another walk than talk about time zones.
so here we have a date field, and we're trying to set a default value for it. And it turns out that whatever time you enter here, 13 o'clock in this case, is interpreted as UTC, regardless of the site's default time zone, regardless of the user's default time zone. When you create node, the default value will be 13 o'clock UTC.
So it's storing it in UTC. Or are we talking more about like when it presents it as in UTC?
As you can see here, with the merge request not applied on the node edit form, the default is for the site, the site wide is 1 p.m. on Saturday. With the patch not applied, node creator R caller Berlin has on the node edit form 2 p.m. on the node itself 2 p.m. and 8 a.m. for the admin, which is in the New York time zone. If the node creator admin New York on the node edit form, it has 8 a.m. and for the node 2 p.m. and 8 p.m. 8 a.m. again. With the merge request applied, it gets in line the 1 p.m. as you can see here for the node creator R caller, and on the node 1 p.m. and 7 a.m. And for the node creator admin, it's also 1 p.m. and on the node 7 p.m. and 1 p.m. for admin. So those are the different scenarios, and we've also just tested that changing that default value from Saturday 1 p.m. and adding a time zone afterwards. GMT and UTC variations saved and were considered as valid, but as Benji found that warning, the Unix timestamp that is this function returns does not contain information about time zones in order to do calculations and so forth. So
I think I followed what you said. But yeah, tricky problem.
space.
So this is a configuration form. It's setting the field configuration. And I just checked, and that value is stored as a string in the database. I'm not sure what validation is applied to it, but it allows us to save it with a time zone. I think the ideal solution would be to properly support a time zone in that string. And if you leave it blank, then it would be interpreted as the user's time zone. If you want the site's default time zone, you could enter the site's default time zone, something like America/New York. If you want UTC, you can enter UTC. That would give you the option of handling, implementing whatever you want. It would also mean that if we change the behavior, which I think is what this issue proposes to do, we could write an update function and say any existing times will be updated to add the UTC so that we won't change behavior on existing sites.
What would happen if the user changes their time zone? So if somebody enters like 13 o'clock and it stores it in the user's time zone, and then the user changes their time zone and opens this again, will it have a will it display the time zone after the initial save? So it would always display the time zone that is stored, even if the user didn't enter it.
So once a user creates a node and saves it, it is not going to change when the user changes their time zone. The only thing that will change is when they create a new node and get the default value, then the default value will have their time zone.
And the old node has basically still the label of the old time zone. And
However it was
fixed.
saved is
Yeah.
that's not going to change.
Okay.
Right. All we're talking about here is when I enter a particular date time string for this default value, how does that date time string get interpreted when I now edit new node and get this default value?
My head is spinning.
Well, at least for you, this meeting is mid-afternoon, right? I this is first thing in the morning for me.
Either awake now or you go straight back to bed.
So, okay, first of all, I said this as if it were a fact, but do you agree that sometimes you want UTC and sometimes you want the site's default time zone and sometimes you want the user's default time zone? Does that seem like there are use cases for all three options?
Yes.
I don't know anymore. Like, can we look at a different issue, please? I mean, I think it'd be, yeah, no, in all seriousness, I think it would, I could see in the Drupal world a use case for anything. So, like, you know, it's, why not?
Okay, so if we want to support all three of those, the first two can be supported by putting in an explicit time zone. UTC, America/New York. I guess it's Germany/Berlin.
I think so, yeah.
And so the third one, the user's time zone, is the only one that can't be supported by putting in an explicit time zone. So if you don't put in a time zone, I think the only way to support those three options is if a time without a time zone means user's time zone, which I think is also what the person who created this issue thinks is the expected behavior.
I think that sounds right because you know if you think about when you use your calendar, right? You don't you're putting things in your time zone. You're not thinking about your time zone. You're just you just expect it's gonna be in that.
Ralph, go ahead.
I definitely see the appeal, and it definitely makes sense to provide that kind of flexibility, but the entire field of time zones is mind-boggling. And by providing that option, making, for example, a time zone explicit for, as you said, the UTC or the site's time zone and change it. But my problem is leaving it empty, defaulting to the user time zone, and that kind of implicit behavior where you have to know that. And yeah, well, you still have to basically document it in a description number to document that behavior, but still those descriptions are not necessarily read. And therefore, I'm worried that unexpected behavior, if you pack all those different possibilities in, could lead also to unwanted or surprising outcomes for people and might be potentially confusing. That is my only worry in that context.
Maybe just add time zone, like the kind of thing we usually select a time zone from, and add a default value or kind of a value for not setting the time zone. Make it read use user's time zone or something like that, and then have the form put it together as a string before storing it, so that it would be two-part widget. Then it would kind of be more obvious, or it would make sense, I think, better.
I feel like we should probably always store things in UTC, right?
This is stored as a string. And remember, when you add a date time field, you have an option to store it as a timestamp or as a date time string.
Yeah. I mean, a timestamp is UTC, so the string should also be stored as UTC, right?
Um,
I mean, I'm just saying like that's what I would expect, right? So like I don't know if that is what's happening. I hope that's what's happening. But I feel like if everything is stored in UTC, then like the conversions to the user's time can happen in in real time. And
the problem here is that this is not an exact time, so you can't store next Saturday as a timestamp to be added. So you can't add a fixed integer value to that means next Saturday. So it needs to be
relative dates are. Sorry, I was kind of not paying attention to the fact we're looking at relative dates here. Oh, why are we doing this? Come on, really? Like, this shit is gonna end us all. I mean, can we still like? Okay, so like, can we still store it as an absolute time now? Because or no, because that's a floating thing. It's not like, ugh. Because if you save that relative date, if you convert it and store it, then you can be like, okay, yeah, you can figure that out on the fly. But then, are we expecting this to be a floating date, or are we just like pointing to like next Saturday, and then we want to store that as absolute, I guess.
Well, we're talking here about relative dates. Relative, the other option for the default date is a fixed date, right?
The current date.
Oh, current.
Yeah.
And that has no options. So I guess we don't have the option. And I guess I can't really think of a use case to have a fixed date, July 17th, 2026 as the default value.
Just to be clear, this is on the field settings, right? So we're setting what the default will be. Yeah.
Yes, it is field and not field storage settings, if that's what you're asking.
How does, I mean, like, does the smart date module solve this problem? Like, how are we?
I was thinking that we should ask for input from, I think Martin Lutz, who's the author of the Smart Date module.
Are you both at NetCamp?
Oh, possibly.
I was almost going to be at NetCamp, but that didn't pan out, unfortunately.
We were both at Bad Camp last month. Too bad I didn't think about this then. So I am, of course, usually in favor of less is more when it comes to descriptions, but I think that if we do add additional options, if we add a time zone option, then that might be a case for a bulleted list of examples. So rewrite the description text or the help text to say something like describe a time by reference to the current day, see string to time for more details, and then examples. Thank you. That's the person I had in mind.
He is there. No, I mean, it's
and this is NetCamp.
He is there.
Okay, so I will buttonhole him tomorrow. Excellent. So I was saying that after the beginning and end of the current help text, have a bulleted list of examples. +1 Saturday, 13 o'clock. This means the user's time zone. +1 Saturday, 13 o'clock UTC. This means UTC. +1 Saturday, 13 o'clock America/New York, where we're filling in the site's default time zone. This means the site's default time zone. Go ahead, Aaron.
Okay, so like on the result of this is that when when you save content with this field that's set relative, does it result in an absolute date being set? Is this like, or does it keep this relative? Like I'm trying to what I'm trying to understand is like, does the relative date get figured out and converted to absolute for storing?
Yep.
Like, yeah.
As you can see here, those are absolute dates then. It's just
Okay.
about for the way forward, if you have recurring dates, for example, a content type with a pattern that you have always on Saturday event X, and that way it's taken care of, sort of.
Right. So, but even in that case, there would be a single absolute value stored in the database for that field on each piece of content. So
Ralph wants to say something. So Aaron, why don't you think about?
yeah.
Just one idea. Instead of providing, it's okay to provide basically the option to add any time zone wanted in there if the format is correct. But I wonder if it would make sense to have some sort what we have on content and notes. For content or notes, some variables like what in the content is front end, use something like user time zone and site time zone. That it's more or less explicit and it's automatically it's clearer that way maybe. Something like user time zone or site time zone, something like that. Or even briefer, site or user.
And here, I'll paste this into the Zoom chat, and maybe Ralph, you can paste that into your text document. That's an example of how it gets stored in the database. There's nothing relative about it. It's a fixed date.
Yeah. So we're just having to figure out what to do to convert it to an absolute date, right? Kind of like which time zone should we assume is the time zone? Or
So that is the string, the date time string, an example. Is it?
I'm sorry, what's the question?
If that is the string that is saved for the relative default value, or
No, that's the string saved for a particular node where
okay.
surprised it doesn't store the time zone actually, but I guess did we figure out it was always converting to UTC?
Good question. Yeah, I think that sort of date time string, if it doesn't have any time zone attached to it, it defaults to UTC.
Yeah. I feel like it'd be better if they explicitly added the time zone in when storing it, but different problem, I guess. Not a usability issue, technically speaking. Not yet, anyway. Probably will surface in some form or another.
Should I do anything on that page, Benji?
So if you,
Content type?
oops. No, field.
No field.
And then node dot date. So it must be about the middle. You made a separate node type for this, didn't you? Node article, node page.
I'm on your on your.
Oh, okay. So on mine, make it node page.
Node page. Test it. Okay, I think.
So you can see there how the relative time is saved as a string.
This one here.
Yeah. So that's exactly what I entered.
Okay. Okay. It makes sense.
All right, so we have 5 minutes left. One follow-up is that I will try to get some advice from Martin at tomorrow's meeting, tomorrow's conference, NetCamp. What else? I think I got some agreement on the idea that all options have reasonable use cases. But I don't think that people are enthusiastic about the idea that the default value we're looking at should be interpreted as current users' time zone. And if you want either the site default time zone or a fixed time zone like UTC, then it should be explicitly specified. Is there any alternative? Is there any other way to support all the possible options? So let me say another thing. I think that first of all, before any other changes are made, the default value should support a time zone. It lets us save it as one. It let us save as GMT plus 4 or 5, whatever you entered. And I think it should also support America/New York. And maybe it does support it and we just haven't figured out the right syntax. Maybe America/New York has to be in quotes or something. I don't know. But it let us save GMT plus 4, but then we got an error when we tried to create new node and get the default value. So I think something has to be fixed there first before we can actually go to this issue. And once it does support time zones, then my suggestion is that that we don't that if you don't specify a time zone, it means current users, and if you do specify a time zone, it respects that.
Yeah, I feel like it should always require you to put something, because otherwise, like, it's so complicated. Like, I just wouldn't feel confident us assuming either thing. I feel like it really has to be down to the use case. So like my feeling would be like we should probably just make whoever's setting out the field, if you're doing this, like we need to force you to think about the implications of time zones, is my feeling.
And the only worry I still have is that implicit behavior that is a spiky road.
I'm sorry, explicit behavior is a spike?
No, implicit behavior is a spiky road,
A
meaning
spiky road, okay.
your tires could go flat.
What? That's a great analogy. Oh my gosh.
I don't think we have that saying in English. We do have the idiom a bumpy road, which is sort of similar, but doesn't actually lead to flat tires.
Why would you drive on a spiky road? I mean, what are you doing, Ralph? What kind of roads do you have over there?
Okay. So we've got to end it here. We're nearing the end of the hour. Any last comments?
Not directly related to this, so I suppose it could be. When I was at Drupal Camp Berlin last week, I had a really great conversation with Sacha. Can't pronounce his last name. Forget it. But who's part
Indeed.
of the Gen, one of the maintainers of Gen Admin theme, works at GitLab, and we ended up starting to chat, and then it was like an hour and a half later, and we were still chatting. But we talked about a bunch of stuff, and one of those things was the idea of like a sort of things that we've talked about before around like patterns and components for like design, and particularly in the Drupal admin interface, like having a sort of design system for the Drupal admin UI. So I just wanted to mention it because it's something that we've talked about before, like taking all of the things that we see and creating a, updating the user interface standards. So I know that's something he's particularly interested in as well. So maybe we can get back to that at some point. Is that something we've talked about? So,
Yeah, I've
so I'd raise
certainly run into issues where something like that would be helpful.
Yeah.
And where we've probably done the wrong thing given what we had.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks all.
Great.
Thank you.
See you next week, I hope.
Thanks.
Enjoy NetCamp.
Bye.
Enjoy NetCamp.
you.
Have fun in your respective time zones.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.